Much looking forward to hearing from both John and Bez, one half of the Atlantic Seaman team. But before we do, this is the point at which we award the Urology Foundation Medal for the Best Research Proposal 2019. And the winner this year not only came top in the peer review process, against an extremely strong field of candidates, it must be said, but also scored extremely highly in our 3-minute pitch process, which in itself is a very high-pressure event held at the Royal Society of Medicine in front of an audience of both experts and lay people as well. And so for her research into investigating renal cancer metabolism using novel surgical methods, I'd like to invite Sissy Yong from Cambridge University up onto the stage to come and receive her medal from John and Andy, please. Thank you. Thanks very much. And now, John Davis and Andy Berry, Bez, and it's not my words, so I hope they won't take offence, but they do describe themselves as just a couple of ordinary middle-aged blokes. And so we're now going to find out how these two seemingly ordinary men have done something very extraordinary and rowed an ocean. Over to you.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Urology Foundation lecture, When the Rowing Gets Tough. So my name's John, and this is my rowing partner, Bez.
Hello.
And we make up one half of a ocean rowing team called the Atlantic Seaman. And this last December, we set off on what was a challenge of a lifetime to row 3,000 miles unsupported all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. The main aim of this adventure was primarily to reignite some passion for adventure in 3 sedentary middle-aged men, 4 sedentary middle-aged men, but also to raise lots of money for the Urology Foundation and awareness of urology disease in general. So a little about the challenge itself. The Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge is described as the world's toughest row, and it's probably one of the most arduous, challenging endurance events on the planet. The event begins in the small island of La Gomera, which is one of the islands of the Canaries, and in fact the same island from which Christopher Columbus set off all those years ago on his own Atlantic voyage. And then what you need to do is row 3,000 miles all the way across from the east side of the Atlantic to the finish line in English Harbour in Antigua. This year, 28 teams took part in the event, and you either row as a soloist, a pair, a 4-man team, or even a 5-man team. And we were a 4-man team. So what that meant was that we had to row for 2 hours on, 2 hours off in pairs, all the way from the start of the race to the finish, which took us 43 days in total. Whilst all the teams set off in a fanfare of glory from La Gomera from the start line in the same day with press, photographers and boats everywhere, about 7 hours after you leave shore, in fact, that's probably the last time you're going to see any of these ocean rowing boats for the entirety of the crossing. The actual distance between the first boat in the fleet and the last boat can be anywhere up to about 1,000 miles. So you really are remote out there on the ocean. And the Talisker Whisky organisers, the chaps who organise the race, are absolute pains to let you know that if you're in trouble out at sea in the middle of the ocean, then physical rescue is probably 3 or 4 days away at best. But to give you a better idea, what we're going to do now is show you the race summary video from Talisker. So if you sit back and relax and enjoy.
Well, this is it.
Bring on the adventure.
The rowers come from all walks of life. What they have in common is determination.
We're going to go out hard and see what happens.
Jeez, so much emotion. Can't wait to go home.
And we're off. The Atlantic, that's where we're going.
The sky is blue, the sun is shining, and the waves are almost agreeing with us.
I've never seen it so calm. It's quite magical. We're not going to go anywhere very fast.
Is the guys working hard?
The days are long, the nights are long. Rowing is boring. It's so freaking boring. You need to have a strong will to be able to do this.
Yeah, it's just such a slog.
Sometimes you just want to cut all the skin off your ass and call it a new day.
The last few days have been some of the toughest I've ever had in my life.
Please make it stop.
Never underestimate the size of an ocean. One small step for man, one giant leap for the king of the surges. Okay, I'm going in. There's so many. Two dolphin swims, one crossing. Awesome. I think I'm the luckiest flipper person alive.
We had a big horde of whales that came swimming with us. It was totally amazing.
It's cold.
We've actually got some waves today. Yes. We managed to get up to 7 knots. We were 20 miles from Masters Atlantic, because I really want to pass them before we hit Antigua. I can see this being a race down to the death.
Victory is at hand.
We are off to hunt down the wolf pack tonight. We are coming for you.
28 miles away from, and if I'm not mistaken, I can see land.
Yes, I'm rowing in.
Can't believe we made it.
Oh, it's a bit emotional now.
Salute from the Antigua Bermuda Defense Force.
It's been amazing, the whole thing from start to finish.
The crossing time of 34 days, 12 hours, and 9 minutes. The winners of the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge 2018, Third Atlantic Fall.
This is one epic adventure.
So, thank you. So, who are the Atlantic Seamen and how did all this come to be? Well, personally, I dreamt about crossing an ocean for about 10 years. I read about the adventures of Che Blythe and John Ridgway, who were the original pioneers of ocean rowing, who in 1968 set off in a very much smaller version of the boat that we rowed in and set off across the Atlantic Ocean. And so looking back on their adventures, I dreamt of this challenge for a long, long time. But unfortunately, because of work commitments and family life, the reality of planning and undertaking something like this was an absolute impossibility. Until I finished my GP training, obviously at quite a late stage, and saw the opportunity to take a sabbatical before taking up a permanent GP partnership. So my wife had actually forbidden me to take on the adventure as a soloist, so I needed to set about finding 3 more people who would join me on the journey. So I was looking back at some of my ex-army colleagues and some friends of mine who had done previous long-distance endurance events, and unfortunately the answer was generally, don't be so crazy, definitely not for me, or I'm not sitting on a boat with you for 2 months, John. So rather despondent, I phoned up my friend Andrew, who was lurking around the corner, and I said, look, Bez, come for a pint with me because I'm really fed up. We sat down at the pub and I said, Bez, nobody wants to do this amazing challenge with me. And then suddenly Bez piped up, I'll do it. And after much mirth and laughter, I looked at him and realised he was actually very serious. But this turned out to be an absolute godsend because Bez's amazing organisational skills and dogged determination have proved to be absolutely invaluable in the 2 years it's taken to plan our adventure. We also fortunately managed to recruit Andy and Alex, a friend of mine from home who's a sailing instructor, and his friend as well, who is an absolutely phenomenal engineer, so he came in very handy. So why the Urology Foundation? Well, as a GP, I obviously see firsthand the devastating effect of urology disease. And also at the start of the planning phase of the row itself, my own grandfather sadly passed away from renal and prostate cancer. So when Ben Eddy suggested the Urology Foundation as the charity of choice, it seemed like a really obvious choice to us. The Urology Foundation are leading the fight against urology disease, and in fact, they are the only charity in the UK and Ireland who tackle all urology disease. I'm going to hand you over to Bez, who's going to take you in the planning phase.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to talk about planning. It took 2 years from that silly conversation in the pub with John to us basically finishing the race. You know, the race, it's organised by a company called Atlantic Campaigns, and it's called the Talisker Whisky Challenge. I mean, the 2 words in each organisation basically sum up what it was about. It was definitely a challenge, and it was definitely a campaign. You know, we were trying to raise awareness, raise funds, raise sponsorship, so we could do the race. You know, we sent out thousands of documents. We chased it up with emails. We were trying to train, you know, at some stage we were doing 3-4 hours training a day on ergos and whatever else. So it was really difficult. And it was more like having a second full-time job, as well as trying to, you know, couple with what we normally do. You know, we both got young families. And it was really hard. It was more or less impossible sometimes day to day. And also, probably 6 months before the start of the race, we lost 2 members of our crew, which was really stressful. And also, we didn't have the funds. We had a month to find our race funds, so it was all really difficult. And then things started changing. We were really lucky. We found 2 new members of staff, 2 new members of crew, Andy and Alex, and we got a really substantial amount of money from Intuitive. So thank you very much to them. You know, for me, I believe the journey to the start of the race was more difficult than the journey itself. You know, as I say, we were trying to raise awareness and funds, and it was really difficult. We had a heck of a lot of help from TUF trying to do that, and they were brilliant. You know, we secured some really good sort of media coverage and press coverage, which was great. We're also on Channel 5, boating around Britain, which was lovely. And we got some really good coverage and support, help with Ben Chalicum from Stephen Fry and Ben Eddy. You know, we had Sir Ranulph Fiennes give us a really good endorsement, and we did really well. We're also on Radio Cornwall every Wednesday morning, even when we were doing the race, every Wednesday morning. John would get to stop rowing for half an hour, I had to carry on, and he did an interview on Radio Cornwall, so that was great. The big thing is, we talk about teamwork, and I understand all you have incredibly stressful jobs, and teamwork is paramount, and teamwork is sort of key. You know, we work really well together. As I say, that unity and strength got us through at times. We started really late as the 4 that rowed across the Atlantic. You know, as I say, in July, it was really stressful. But we worked really well as a team. I can give you 2 examples. On the, you know, packing the boat, as you can see all the kit. There was a heck of a lot of stuff to get on the boat, a heck of a lot of stuff to organise. We packed it, we did it really well. In fact, the race organiser said that we were the most organised team, which was great. Another really sort of stressful thing happened. On day 5, we had a problem with our steering. It's called auto helm. And basically, the solar panels weren't charging the battery, so it stopped working. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. There was massive seas, sort of 5-6 metre high seas. And the first thing that we had to do was stop the boat capsizing, and then we just had to try and work out what the problem was. And as a team, I think we did really well. It took us 5 days to work out that problem, but there we go. You know, the race start was phenomenal. You saw it in the video. It was a really exciting thing to be part of. And the other thing being is, John and I were absolutely ready to start. You know, we'd been planning it for 2 years. It had controlled our whole lives. You know, the race start was amazing. So you had lots of people, you had chatter, you had the music, you had flags, you had klaxons. And then we all set off 10 minutes apart to, again, massive cheers and loud sort of air horns. It was brilliant. I mean, the first 24 hours was just a complete blur, really. But it's also a realisation that you know, you're doing it. You can't climb off. You can't turn back. There is no help. It's just you, your crew in the boat, which was amazing, actually. And we're really pleased to start. You know, we talk about passion and it being an enormously powerful force. You know, for me, being in a boat 1,000 miles from land was, you know, with no point of reference, is quite scary. You can't see the bottom. You can't see any land. You just got sky. It was really scary. And you know, having that drive and that goal and that passion, it sort of puts things into perspective. You know, for me, I was 50 this year, which was so I was 49 on that photograph. But I was 50 this year, and I wanted some sort of epiphany on the row. And I think what I got was that passion. I really loved my family. I was really lucky. You know, the row is, you know, for the first 5 days, we were absolutely shattered. We had no idea how difficult it would be. And then you realise, you just think, gosh, you know, we're only 10% through the challenge. You know, if we can't get the auto helm working, it could be a heck of a lot longer. So we've got another 40 days to do. So you were absolutely shattered. And we put there eat, sleep, row, repeat, and that's exactly what it was. You know, to eat, you had to boil the water, you had to rehydrate your food, you had to try and take on 6,000 calories a day, and you had to try and drink 10 litres of water. So it's really difficult. I mean, sleep, you know, you try and get as much as you possibly could, but you've also got to do all your chores. You've got to do your personal hygiene. You've got to make that water. You've got to tend to your wounds. You've got to fix your boat. You've got to clean the boat. So you're only probably getting maybe an hour's sleep within those 2 hours. So it was really difficult at times. You were shattered. And then you've got to row. And there was many a time I'd be sort of sat in my cabin going, do I have to get on those oars again? And you did, and I've got to say it was great. You know, I sort of rowed with John every time. And you didn't want to get on the oars, but the minute you're on, you'd just be chatting. You'd have a little, you know, have a little sing-song. You might just be quiet, you know, we'd play music. So it was wonderful. I mean, I remember one night, which was particularly amazing. It was incredibly calm. You know, the sky was full of stars. We saw loads of shooting stars, which was amazing. And the ocean was absolutely flat calm. It was slate grey. And every time we sort of tapped the oars, we got all the phosphorescence off the back of the oars, and it was amazing. We had a pod of dolphins down our port side, and we were listening to Graceland, so we were singing and sort of having a nice time. But as I say, you know, that eat, sleep, row, repeat, it's that routine and that discipline that sort of gave us focus and got us through at times.
So hopefully Bez has described some of the high points of the row itself, and we really did have some life-affirming highs. But unfortunately, as you might expect, we did have a tipping point, and we did have some desperately sort of dark low points on the boat. Living for 43 days on a 23-foot boat with 4 smelly middle-aged men who are on the whole naked is really quite a tough thing to do. And really interesting, one of the things that people have asked most often since we've come back from the row, which I found quite fascinating, is did you get on? So people don't come up to us and say, you know, tell us about the big waves, tell us about the time you swam with a whale, or whatever it might be, the lovely night skies, whatever it is. Everybody wants to know, it's obviously human nature, everybody wants to know, did we fall out and did we argue? So I developed a stock answer to that question. And I say to people, well, imagine if you were on a little boat with your husband, partner, wife, and you rowed away from shore into the middle of the ocean. How many days do you think it would take before you started arguing? And I think it's a bit of a reality check for people, because yes, we did argue, but I'd like to say that it wasn't very often. And you know, those arguments generally were bore out from extreme fatigue. So I apologise slightly for this next slide, but it basically is a collection of photos that gives you an example of some of the tough times we had on the boat. So that's, in the top right-hand corner, that's somebody's bottom. And that's what a bottom looks like just before you develop proper saltwater sores. And as you can imagine, once they develop, there's literally nothing you can do apart from just lather on Sudocrem tub after tub. So that was hard work. In the middle photo at the top there, you can see Bez, and he's steering the boat by hand steering. So there's some little pulleys either side of the boat. And that's because, which you can't really tell in that photo, the magnitude of the waves. We had 2 or 3 story high waves, and that boat was firing down the face of those waves at about 11 knots. So any mistake in the steering, that boat's going to just flip over. And then you can see the food in the top left-hand corner there, which was just diabolically boring. But as you can expect, you know, we briefly mentioned earlier about losing power. I just wanted to reiterate how awful that was, that sensation of thinking we might be about to lose power. About 800 miles from land we were, and we could see our battery chargers going down and down and down. So just to explain, without power, we can't steer the boat automatically. We can't make our water without hand pumping. There's no electronic navigation equipment, and there's no way of communicating with people. So that power loss would have meant that our journey across the ocean, instead of taking 40 days, could have potentially taken 80 days. And we knew that, and that was really, really devastating until finally we found this faulty switch and managed to get the problem fixed. But of course, I think you'd also expect us to talk about the weather. And the weather was just amazing. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can see a squall. And when we came towards Antigua, these squalls hit us so feverishly, so powerfully, that it was impossible not to be scared. You could be rowing in flat, calm water, and 1 minute later, you're in the middle of a howling storm. I remember one particular night when me and Bez were rowing, where the waves were so big, and it was hammering down so hard, with 40-mile-an-hour wind on our stern, and we just had to keep rowing. If we'd opened the hatches to let out our teammates onto their rowing shift, we simply would have swamped the boats and potentially capsized or sunk the boat. So we just had to make the decision that we were going to row for 4 hours non-stop, and it was pretty horrific. But the main challenge for us on our row, as you saw from the original video, was we were becalmed for a lot of the time. The Atlantic trade winds, which are supposed to blow you from east to west, just didn't help us at all. We had wind in the wrong direction, we had adverse Atlantic currents, and one day we rowed for 12 hours and we made 1 mile. So what have we learned from all this? I think we would all agree that you know, one of the most important aspects of working in a difficult circumstance, in a team environment, you know, either on something like this or indeed in real life, is the importance of humility. But also we learned the importance of being able to say sorry. So during those very dark times when we really did fall out, and somebody was having a really tough day, the characteristic of humility and understanding was really, really important. And we also learned the importance of a proper, heartfelt apology. We also learned respect for each other, and the fact that sometimes people just need to be in their own thoughts. Privacy is really important, which sounds strange because on the ocean rowing boat there's nowhere to go, so the only privacy you have is in your own head. So the only chance you can get away from people is just by delving into your own thoughts. And we had to learn to understand that, because you expect people to be talking all the time. And people weren't being morose, they weren't being miserable, but they just needed a bit of space. And so we had to learn to respect that. But in the end, through hellish adversity, discomfort, and extreme fatigue, this only served to make our dream a more powerful reality. A phenomenal 2 years of hard work, 43 days on the ocean, and here we are at the finish line in Antigua, only a few oar strokes away from our family and friends, just around the corner in Nelson's Dockyard. Simply one of the most phenomenal, life-changing moments for any of us. It was absolutely amazing. For those 2 years, anything could have gone wrong to make the dream crash and burn, and this was the point where we realised we'd done it. I think there's a little video. Okay, the long-awaited day we've always dreamed of. Another little shot of the Absar team following the Atlantic Seaman into Antigua after their crossing of the Atlantic Ocean, taking 43 days. There they are, and here are the guys who've done it all. Hey, all right. Woo! Yeah. There you are, guys, the Atlantic Seamen's legends in their own lifetime. There you go.
Yeah, I've got to say, 43 days, it was 8 hours and 4 minutes it took us. I mean, for me, looking at, spending 15 hours looking at sort of naked men looking at willies and testicles, I couldn't do a job like that. Coming into Antigua was a phenomenal experience. We had lots of boats out there, all cheering us on, and it was a phenomenal feeling. You know, we rode into Nelson's dockyard with all the super yachts, pipping their horns and shouting and cheering us on. You know, seeing our families up on Shirley Heights was an amazing experience. You know, getting off the boat after 43 days, we couldn't stand. You know, our legs just didn't work at all. So we got off the boat to rapturous applause, wobbly legs, and we all got to hug our families, and that was a phenomenal experience.
So, what are our thoughts now we've finished it? Now the row is a few months behind us. Was it worth it? I think the whole team would definitely agree that it was definitely worth it. It really did turn out to be the adventure of a lifetime. It was absolutely phenomenal. But I agree with Bez. Looking back, the hardest part by far was the 2 years of planning, the hard work, the stress, the worry, and we definitely couldn't have done any of that without the support of our family and friends. As you can see, you know, we're not superheroes, neither are super athletes, but hopefully what we've proved to each other and maybe other people is that, you know, dreams and adventures are definitely within reach for anybody. I think you just have to pick the challenge, be prepared for the hard work, push through any adversity, and keep your eye on the end game. I would finally like to say a massive thank you to the Urology Foundation again, in particular to the fantastic Ciara, Louise and Serena, and of course our good friend Ben Eddy. Without all of these guys, the adventure wouldn't have come true at all. And of course, an enormous thanks to all our sponsors, and of particular relevance today would be Intuitive, Surgical, Ashford Hospital and CJ Medical. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Okay,
Thank you. A huge thank you to John and Bez. And if you'd like to know more about their adventure, they are still around for the rest of the afternoon. And so you can come and speak to them on the TUF stand, number 322. Thanks very much, everybody.